Live.
Hi, I'm Steve.
And I'm John.
And we're the Bull Critters Corner.
Welcome again to another show of Coffee with the Bull Critters Corner.
So, outside media content from Media and Games. That seems to be the idea that we've had up on the board now for, 3-4 weeks?
Oh, well, was that originally up there?
Yeah, it was up there in the big list of other ideas.
Well, that's a pretty broad topic. So, when you break it down, what do you mean by outside content from media games for the discussion? Are we talking about, like, incorporating outside music, video, and all that into a gaming session? Are we talking about getting inspiration from outside media content, movies, TVs, books, etc.?
I think inspirations. You can draw a lot of inspiration from video game stories, from TV shows, movies. And the other thing it allows you to do for your gaming sessions is actually look at your individual players and what their interests are. What they really dig, and start trying to, if it works with what you have for a setting, present some of those particular elements. If you have someone who's into the NCIS or what the other crime drama shows, maybe present an investigation. You already have, hundreds of episodes that already outline how to structure the story portion. All you have to do is kind of mechanics and bring it into the realm of your own setting.
Yeah, lately working on the write up for the chase for the module. Going through my mind, I'm thinking of chase scenes from movies and things. And one thing I noticed in every single chase scene is it's usually a continuous sprint. Obviously through obstacles, we've seen that before. But if you watch any movie, the tempo, the pace increases, and I keep thinking for images to try to write for the module. And I keep coming to this same collection of trope images from chase scenes, which is narrow pathways you have to run through, rooftop stuffs. But even on the rooftop, it's usually this narrow thing. It hasn't, unless you're watching some old 50s Hitchcock. There's no broad rooftop chase.
It usually only opens up in a sense when they hit something like a market where.
Now there's people,
even though it seems like a larger area,
it's just congested.
It becomes congested with people, or
Italian
some
Job.
Sort of an obstruction gets knocked down to create again that feeling of claustrophobia almost.
Yeah, like Italian Job. They literally take the car chase to the most narrow possible strip possible. You're going up and down the stairs.
I don't.
The Mini Coopers.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
yes.
Like you had to get a smaller car just to do it. But yeah, no. So I think that's it's really good. And when you're looking for things like that, like say you have one of your players is obsessed with Top Gear, the TV show about all the race cars and all that, and you happen to be playing a game in a world where that kind of thing is possible, or even a fantasy realm maybe where but in this fantasy world maybe there are certain interests that we bring to the game.
Top Gear becomes mechanical mules.
Yeah, Top Gear becomes decking out the cart. Top Gear becomes, the survival van your hunter party puts together.
The wagon we had in Damien's game.
Yeah, exactly.
Had
the van.
Sponsorship from taverns, almost like a NASCAR race car.
And the
bit ridiculous, but awesome.
I mean, you can bring in these different aspects of the game that you might not even have thought to have folded in, but knowing that there's a player with interest, you can find a way to come up with your own mechanics to it or things like that. As a DM that's incorporating this, it's your own thing, so it's obviously the challenge then is balancing, but knowing that anything that you give, you can also find ways to pull back from as well.
Yeah,
I think that it's a good subject matter for stories. You want to do one shots. I think we've actually talked about that on this program before. One of the greatest ways to put together a one shot is to grab two different medias that you like and ram them together. We're going to play Starship Troopers Chucky.
Yeah,
gonna
I mean
play,
that's
you
one
know.
approach. In the realm of talking about one shots, though, you also have a great avenue opened up to you with literally episodic TV shows. Essentially, if you were doing some sort of a monster hunting game, setting unimportant, or not setting, game genre, you could take any one of the episodes of the first season of something like
Well, Supernatural.
Supernatural. That's where I was going.
Is Hunter the Reckoning. I mean, it's
it-
literally the same.
But
It's the same
at
concept.
that point, it was Monster of the Week. If you want a more investigative, stylized one, just jump from that one to the X-Files, and you have essentially your story parameters for a one-shot
And you'll find that
episode to episode, and then you can even go so far as to string them together or interweave the two different stories. It can be weird, but interesting.
especially if you find a way to get those to connect. But one of the things I was going to say with things like incorporating X-Files for investigation and you sure you want to put
It's only a momentary thing, so I
Oh.
could adjust my seating.
cool. Who care? I mean, it's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
books. Sorry, I just got sidetracked there. No, what I was gonna say is when you incorporate the actually I think I might have lost it. Dang.
That's terrible.
Xanthars.
So, the other ideas would be looking at video games.
That.
Now, video games have tons of stories, and again, story is the easier thing to steal. But sometimes there's an interesting mechanic or an interesting side game, or those are pretty much side games
You can
mechanics.
incorporate Final Fantasy card game or Sabacc into any role playing game.
Yeah,
But I remember
I
my
like-
point real quick.
Okay.
The point I was going to get is because you were getting out on story, so you can go into X-Files or you can go into Supernatural to pull these story elements to create your thing, whether it be Monster of the Week or this is the investigative process. So when you break down that story, or when you break down those episodes you watch to get that story, inside of each of these genres, no matter what the topic is, or what the specific show is that's interesting to you, inside this genre you will find tropes. You will find that these stories have elements that are in each of those stories, the way they story unfold. If you watch police
Sure.
shows,
You're-
procedurals, like Law and Order, you'll see that there is a technique to how they're introducing the false bad guy. Early on. They're creating this so that there are
They're the
They're-
very tools of
storytelling that
and
you can
story
pull out of
writing.
these tropes. So if you want to get the most across for your investigative thing, you can start pulling out the actual unfolding story elements, how that process worked, and kind of see how can I fit some of these pieces into my story. Because one thing is, while it is, trope can be a pejorative, but it is a useful tool to use. One of the things, that familiarity though, can sometimes be helpful to the player to
Again,
realize
if
what kind of
it's-
game they're in.
If it's something that they're interested in,
Yeah,
just
it has to be
presenting
that.
certain elements will draw or well, not always, but it has a strong potential to draw one player in a direction. And the thing I've found DMing, if you start to present a particular thing, and then someone opens their mouth and says, "Oh God, this is a zombie horror game," before you've even shown the first zombie. The first time you get someone who says, "Ah, shoot, we're dealing with vampires,"
You get
or
deflated.
something. That's one. The DM can sometimes get
Deflated,
deflated,
yeah, I
but
can
the
imagine.
other side of that coin, especially if it's only said once, and the person who says it doesn't hammer it in like it's
I can't believe I'm here doing this.
But once someone puts that out there, everyone at the table is now looking for the elements that are known to that particular genre,
Yeah.
that particular story. So if someone suddenly goes, "Oh crap, this is like NCIS," or what's the one with the weird bong sound?
Law and Order.
Law and Order.
Yeah, Law and Order.
I couldn't remember that.
Yeah, the police procedural. Yeah.
Yeah. But if someone all of a sudden is like, "Oh crap, this is,"
Well, that can be
but
good.
the
I mean, if it-
the crap part isn't
Isn't good.
necessarily. No, it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
bad because he or she still said the law and order part, which means now everyone at the table is going to, at some point, probably double look at it and then think, how many times have I seen Law and Order? Okay.
What are the rules?
What are the rules to the story that we clearly think we've just entered into?
Well, that's the thing. Part of it, part of the reason I think I look at the oh crap and I go crud, that's not good. If I was a DM, my first thought is like, oh, they're not gonna dig this. That person right there said oh crap because they're like they don't want to be a part of this kind of thing.
I don't know.
But
that's kind of like
it's like
the
easily.
forget about it from that one TV show or movie. It's all a matter of the tonality and body language.
Oh, you mean like, oh crap, we're about to get screwed, not like, oh crap, I'm in this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes more.
So-
Yeah, I can totally deal with that. Well, one of the cool things about that though is, so say that, oh my God, we're in a Law and Order, blah 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 blah, and then you have people at the table with the trophy stuff, and they're probably even out of character. Maybe might be going, no, the first guy that they introduced can't be the guy. So what you can start doing once you realize what their familiarity with these tropes is, you can start actually taking the trope,
turn them
flipping
on
it
their
on
head.
its head.
Yeah.
You make that first intro bad guy that looks really guilty. He's the guilty guy. And then they're in the bag holding at the end going, but I thought that... And then they get to understand that they are a part of a world that still brings unexpected things.
Yeah.
That even though there are tropes and all of this, the players themselves aren't pigeonholed into some kind of story that has to play out this given way.
And yeah, that can keep things lively.
I love the idea for one shots, and I started thinking about it when we first. I was running through I was trying to in my other head going through lists of things like outside content, and I started thinking about what about some outside content that you know what, I'm not every group in the world, but I know that my group centers around when we pull outside content for one shots or for this or that. We pull from sci-fi movies,
we
things like that.
hitting a lot of sci-fi.
When was the
movies.
last time you pulled a book from when you were like in 6th grade and you were like, you know what, I want to bring this Hatfield McCoy thing that I read about and bring some of these elements. I started thinking about what about period pieces. My group, we do not do a lot of period pieces for our one shots, but that could be interesting too. Like Napoleon just got exiled to the island. A revolution is in its midst in France, and Waterloo's around the corner, or whatever.
I think period pieces can be very interesting because it allows you to explore the what if scenario. But I also think that if you're going to step into the realm of a period piece, it takes a particular group that has an actual interest in it.
Yeah, I think that you'd have to stick to pirates. I think pirates would be a good one.
Even
for a lot of
though
folks.
for period pieces, we've done multiple games that have taken place in World War II is one that we've done for a lot of different
couple
one
different
shots.
times, yeah.
But usually when we're addressing it, it's less
Gloss. It's that glossy surface.
Yeah, the setting or the I'm losing words.
Like the specifics of the locations,
yeah,
and the people involved.
It's
and
much
all
less
that.
about the war. The war is this backdrop that gives us a tone, and then all of a sudden that tone gets ramped up to 110% on something completely different. The Predator one. I know that we've also done Nazi zombie experiments once, where you guys were. I think you guys were playing French resistance fighters in that one, or were you playing concentration camp resistance fighters? I can't remember now.
I don't know.
I know it was a pretty intense game. Oh hell, you weren't here for that when you were in college.
See, yeah, that's why I was like, I can't remember that. But doing that, and this is, it's not something that you need to go to necessarily for all the things. If you are out of, if there's a lull in your game, you can't figure out, and you need to spice up a night of role playing to separate from that. These also alternate history. Now that you mentioned that too, you could literally go into an alternate history fantasy world. You have books for inspiration on things like that. So if somebody out there is into that, and therefore there's going to be a DM that could
there's
recognize
certainly
that.
people that are into it.
And alternate history is one of those ones you can blend genres. You can be alternate history, but also again, zombies. I get.
Yeah, no, but again, it's a matter of reading the table. if your group likes a more realistic, almost a more gritty style game, or maybe just a more historically accurate game, or even a vaguely historic game, then that's going to be great. I know a lot of people that I've interacted with, they come to the table, they don't want anything to do with Earth at all. You know, we're in the Forgotten Realms, we're in Ravenloft.
They want the high fantasy.
They want high fantasy, and even though those places have, in a lot of, general ideas, problems that aren't too different from the crap that we deal with
human
here.
Issues and darkness.
Yeah, but they aren't here. And that is, for some people, important. And other people, they want to be here. They want to be in, ancient Greece or during the Roman period, and that can be...
Well, I think for those familiar with White Wolf, I think the sentiment is very similar to I want to play White Wolf, but I don't want to play mage. Like I want to play vampires. I can deal with that. Okay, there's a little explanation there. Okay, this I can deal with. Hunter, I can deal with that. Okay, demon, I guess I can. That's a little powerful. I don't know. And then you get to mage, and it's like, wow, you can make anything happen. This seems a little not real. I mean, I like mage, but everybody else in the world apparently seems to hate it. But the idea that
you're building your opinion off of our own groups.
Yeah, okay, everybody in my group seems to fucking hate it.
For White Wolf, and it's varied runs. It's got the different different core books. The thing is, you're going to have players that prefer one over the other, and although they all use the same skeletal structure of a system, they are wildly different in their power scheming and what sort of stories you're theoretically supposed to be telling with them. They're all intended to be dark horror, survival games almost. The idea of surviving as these people or creatures in this horrible world is the ultimate experience of the game. Like, for most vampires, it's not you're a superhero. All of a sudden, you're a dude who a year ago was just a dude.
Yeah, you have more burdens.
And now all of a sudden, you're a dude who has to go and, one way or another, get blood from a living person
in order to live.
In order to interact and do the things that you want to do.
And try to stave off the beast while keeping your humanity. Well, no, what I meant in the difference between White Wolf and Mage is I think there's just people out there that are like, or even low magic settings. They're like, oh, I believe that my archer can do a multi-rapid shot. Why? Because it's physical, but it's the wizard that blows up 2 fireballs that makes the other person go, oh, this doesn't seem believable. It's because in Mage, Vampire, you know what a person can do, or what a vampire could do, the expectations, the rule sets. But when you get to Mage, it's as long as no one knows about the paradox, and I can do this, and I can make anything with my imagination.
Their rules were written a bit too loose, in my opinion. But if you really look at the rules, as long as you don't have a bunch of people at your table who are just trying to meta max the game, the system at its core works really well.
Oh, I'm just talking about the fact that once you can use magic, it changes the tone of a reality. In a low magic setting, Dark Side, or the low no magic settings, the grittiness and realness. There's a touch of grittiness and realness that might be damaged if magic comes into play. It seems, and it seems like in White Wolf they do that a lot too. They Supernatural's fine, but when you get to magic is when things get a little hinky, and people are like, "Well, I don't know about the reality of this game anymore."
I mean, I guess it was never my problem with it. My problem was a more mechanical one, where it just was not very well codified, in my opinion.
What could and could not be done.
But as far as damaging the reality of the game, the beauty of the way they set up magic in that game is if you start doing the things that would damage the reality of the game, reality comes back and takes a big bite out of you.
No, what I mean, okay, so Ravenloft. We have a dark setting. Ravenloft is the closest thing you're going to get to the White Wolf world in D&D, right? Somewhere in there. Somewhere halfway between Ravenloft, maybe Dark Sun.
Okay.
Right? Sure, for the mood, the tone.
Sure.
I'm just talking about the mood and the tone. Like the darkness, the grittiness,
okay.
death is around every corner. Can you survive the night? There are
Yeah.
boogeymen outside trying to get you.
I'm with you.
But in Ravenloft, I can have a half dragon that shoots fire out of his hand in public, whereas in White Wolf's version of that, like, you could technically do the same thing with Mage, although Paradox.
I can have a Tremere,
I'm saying, like,
I can have a Tremere vampire walk out and shoot fire from his fingers.
But what I mean is, like, the list of things that are there of fantastical nature is wild and diverse in D&D. I'm saying it, like, breaks a realism. Like, for me, that's what high fantasy does to me in the first place, is it breaks the sense of realism at least a little bit, because I'm like, at any point in time, a griffin can fly out and land, and Gandalf can get off and say, "Ho there, we have a quest for you." It's technically possible in this world. Whereas in like White Wolf, it's like, no griffin's ever coming. If it does, that means Malkavian has gotten your head, and now you're screwed. Like, you don't want a griffin coming.
yeah.
It can only be bad in the White Wolf world.
I'm following you.
You know, like high fantasy doesn't exist in the way. I think there. I don't know. I mean, I could be horribly wrong. I just haven't seen a great example of high fantasy and high dark at the same time. Like, dark, despair, and high fantasy. Because it's always like in high fantasy you have a resurrection spell. You know, the bad guy or our main lead is in a coma. Don't worry, he'll be awake next week. You know, in White Wolf it's like, you got killed. Yeah, no, here's a new character. You're dead. There are no options. You cannot come back to life. A demon from Demon the Fallen can't. Like, you're done. It's over. Good game.
Actually, a demon from Demon the Fallen
Can? At what, like at a later level or high level or something? Or do they just go back to hell?
Oh, wait, no. I mean, they can resurrect you.
They can resurrect humans. I meant, like, demons cannot, if you're playing Demon and Demon the Fallen. Because, like, Demon the Fallen, demons don't exist outside unless the DM chooses to make them.
As long as someone doesn't eat you, you just go back to hell, and then you have to go through the torturous process of trying to drag your way back out.
Yeah.
Which is almost impossible.
Demon is a long game. A long game.
Actually,
no, I mean by,
I've only played two times, and it was very short because the players that I was playing with read how powerful they thought they were, and then realized that when you're that powerful, the things that you generally mess with when we have to break out dice are equivalently or more so powerful.
Gods, yeah. No, what I mean is by long game is in order to play it well, you have to play a long game.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be like, here's my plan, and we're going to slowly tick down this road.
In that style of game, you're playing 3D chess.
Yeah, you're playing 3D chess with 5 other people at a table and a DM who's creating other AI opponents for you. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, White Wolf has a good diversity of games. I kind of like how they did it all in one world. But you get what I mean, though, about how... Now, have you seen any good high fantasy mixed with, like, really dark stuff? I mean, you got, like, Dragon Age Inquisition.
I was gonna say, for a video game, Dragon Age really achieved that for me, but...
I mean, you could find some older video games.
There is a Dragon Age RPG. I've never looked at it, so I couldn't say left or right. Game of Thrones, well, it doesn't really have dread. It has high mortality rate.
Well, no, I would say that's a world where if you leave the house, you're not sure if you're going to live or die. Like, if your name was put on a page, like, and the characters are all conscious, they're inside the book, like, it's Reboot. Like, all of them are just waiting for it to drop. Like, am I dead? I'm going to die, right? But the thing is I don't count that as high fantasy. You have 3-4 instances of actual fantasy in the... Okay, you have the Nightwalker thing. Okay, that's the fantasy big bad. Well, we can deal with that. We already deal with vampires, and that's not too far off real. They still look like humans. They were once humans that have been turned into this thing.
You have fairies.
You have
fairies.
The mage, the witch. Right.
You have a blood sorceress.
Yeah, blood sorcerers.
So we're already at 3 things that are high.
I've only seen the TV show. What fairies are in the TV show? Oh, the wood people.
The wood people.
Okay.
They're
so wood people
they're
and then dragons. That's 4 things in the entire world.
You have some sort of a weird disease that turns people to stone.
That's not that weird of a disease. I can look at a few human ones as inspiration. It wouldn't be too hard to... I mean, like, stone is a thing that's a little odd.
A weird disease where a guy just has to do that to you, and you start full-body stoning?
We have leprosy. And if you just take leprosy to the next step and go instead, it just calcifies all of your stuff into rock with mineralizing your... I mean, it's not horribly impossible in my mind. It's not like only magic could have done that. But how about this? When you're inside Westeros, just Westeros, during that whole setup of the story, how much high fantasy is there? How long does it take for the high fantasy to even appear?
Well, you're in a nation that a long time ago was conquered by dragons.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of high fantasy.
And in the
the
TV show
history
doesn't go into a lot of that back.
the history
stuff.
of
It's all
your
legend to
the
them.
history of your own setting or your own like place there. There's enough high fantasy there that I'd still consider it on the like bottom end of high fantasy.
Okay, then I would say then that would be a great example of high fantasy mixed with darkness. I just when I think high fantasy, I think there aren't many scenes that are going to be occurring without magic in play. There's not many plot elements that are going to be unfolding without magic at play somewhere in that plot element. Like the D&D movie that came out that was wretchedly...
Well, that was a ridiculous.
Well, they
movie.
tried to play it dark, though. Oh, he's a thief from the street. Look at this dungeon. Isn't this trap really complex? Everything's dangerous, but everything was shot really bright. Nothing felt dangerous at all. Oh, they get mugged on the road. It looked like I might as well have been watching an episode of Wishbone.
So
Like-
that's what high fantasy is for you?
High fantasy for me is like when you walk into the market square and there's a tiefling and then there's a troll and then there's a dwarf and then there's a blank and then there are so many races that I'm not actually going to sit and ask the DM for the diversity of magic I'm seeing, because to do so would be irrelevant at this point. Like if I go to Planescape, we are now in a high magic setting. We are in high fantasy up the butt. Why? We have portals opening doors to places. Nothing makes sense.
When you go to Planescape,
We got rats
you
that
might
can
as
think.
well be in sci-fi already. Like you're almost stepping outside of what is high fantasy and going
and
to science
astronomical fantasy. Well, Ionis fantasy. Like
Yeah.
it's in the atmosphere itself. It's about to be escaping. But yeah, that's what I think of high fantasies, where magic is built into the lines of the entire world you're crafting. And I think like the opposite of that, obviously, no fantasy, low no, which is like magic doesn't exist, or there's one person in the world that can cast a spell.
So you're saying
There's
that
one
if
tribe
there's
of
a
elves.
large mixture of races in one city, automatically that makes you not even want to ask what magic's involved?
I'm going to assume, if I see a bunch of races in one world, that I'm in a world where there's a lot of magic that's going to be present. Now, if I'm surprised and there's a bunch of different races that are built by magic, is it technically, like if you go to a no magic world, low no magic, you probably don't have gods. Or you don't have many, or they're asleep, or they're gone, or whatever else.
Okay, so the divine aspect is low to non-existent, you're saying.
Yeah. And because the divine aspect is lone and non-existent, that then walks into, well, who made the dwarves? So if you have dwarves and all that, and you surprise me by it being a no magic setting, that I would love that. I would love. There's tons of different races and creatures and all that, but magic doesn't exist. These dwarves didn't come from magic. They evolved the same way every other species evolved in this fashion into a race, and developed a community and a civilization and all this. But if you go back to the crafting of the D&D itself, it's like, what happened? Well, the dwarves were the first race. They were put together like this, and then the elves got made, and then this happened here, and and that's the canon for the.
Sure, but how is that any different than a actual modern setting? Christian belief says one thing, Hindu belief says one thing. We all still have a strange creation story. So
Well, because in high fantasy settings, that creation story is real, and the god literally interacts with the world.
okay, but
that makes it high
If
fantasy.
all you do is pull the god aspect back, and their story is still a dude made us
Yeah, that's
from.
fine. See, that's great. That's just backstory. I'm saying when the divine can literally interrupt in the world, you're now in high fantasy. Or you're at least in fantasy.
But that doesn't have any bearing on how many races are there. Like for you just said intrinsically, if I have a bunch of races, then
I'm going to
clearly
assume because
they
every
only
game I've ever
have to be
played
magical.
No, it's not that. It's that every game I've played, whether there's a huge diversity of races in the world,
Okay.
it follows up that there's also magic.
Because
highly.
it just ends up sitting in the standard show.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It sits in the
No,
standard of
it
D&D.
was a curious question.
Now, because I have yet to see a low or no magic world where it's like, no, there are a bunch of races that interact with each other. That, like, I haven't seen that yet, actually, in a game I've played.
I think for you, you've just set that a low magic setting for you is going to be one that's human dominated with next to no other humanoid races.
I mean, it can be that.
I'm curious why the existence of other humanoid races leads to a higher magic setting for you.
I just said it. Every time I've played it, where there's a diverse amount of monsters, there's always been magic, high fantasy. I've never played a game where there's been a lot of races and it's a low magic setting. Although I've only played a handful of low magic setting games too.
You don't get very many of them.
Most people stay away from the low magic settings.
That's
I get it. The
because
idea of
magic
playing
is fun.
D&D.
Will you stop slapping the
sorry.
table?
I was gonna say I get it. The idea in D&D is fantasy.
Yeah.
So you can't chagrin somebody for wanting to come to fantasy when they come there.
No, of course.
But I feel that would be one of the things. The divine intervention. If magic is a rarity, if the entire quest is you becoming magical, or gaining a thing of magic.
Game.
Well, no, I mean like in the other way. Like there's one mage in the world, and he's the bad guy, and that's who you're fighting, and you run a campaign from level 1 to level 20, and by level 20, now you are magic. Why? You are now a god of the world. Why? Because if you can do magic and no one else can, that's pretty much what you are.
I think in that regard, you're overshooting the power of magic, but okay.
Well, I mean, if you're the only level 20 mage in the world or whatever.
Well, if you're the only level 20 mage,
Well, if you're only level 5 mage in the world, you're still...
Scary.
Because you're also whatever else you are. Plus, you have magic that no one knows. You got to think about the power of that. In a world where no one thinks magic exists, you using magic, you can probably get away with it 10 times more easily. And there's no paradox. You're literally playing mage with no paradox.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, once you have like a lot of like magicians, mages, like if you have an alchemist shop, okay, I can deal. Herbalist shop, yeah, totally. Literally, here's a magic shop where you can buy magic items and magic tomes and magic books, and there's magic amulets and there's magic this and there's magic that. Then I go, we're now in fantasy, which is okay.
High fantasy.
Yeah, at the point it's that you can buy it at a shop, it's like, okay, this is a pretty common thing, and a lot of the games you play, that's what that is.
Yeah, that is a commonality that I think for us mostly was built from 3rd edition's almost necessity for magic items.
And I think that's one of those things you got to gauge your party on, right? You got to figure out would my party enjoy having to fight to get the magic and the magic meaning more? Does my party really like the diversity of magic being available to them in high fantasy, that they get to go do the different things that they've always wanted to do?
Will your players find it more interesting to get a +1 flaming greatsword, or would they find it more interesting to get the master crafted iron greatsword? There's no not +1, not magic, in the setting where really all you do is have very run-of-the-mill weapons, and run-of-the-mill becomes kind of the wrong word. Like, let's say, although Skyrim is hugely high fantasy,
yeah,
okay, there's no doubt in that, but I'm going to use them for an example. You start out and you have iron weapons, and then the next thing that you find, like long before you ever find what is actually a magic weapon, you'll probably find a steel weapon, and from steel you might end up finding an orcish weapon or a dwarven weapon. Now, none of these are actually magic items. They're just crafted out of different techniques of crafting or different materials. And those you can give some sort of mechanical bonus for, too.
Or negative, since it's an off-race thing.
Possibly.
Like higher damage, but harder to use. I think that's what they did with the double axe back in 3rd, right?
It was a racial, like, if you were an orc, you automatically got proficiency with it. Otherwise, you had to
get the
spend a
feat.
feat. Yeah.
So with that, like, thinking about how that works in Skyrim with the finding of the different types of weapons and things. So you could do that. Like you could bring a world where you have very low magic with all of these races in play from the start. And the unique thing that you're finding that's out of the ordinary, that's kind of neat and cool, are different items from the other races. And then the magic item is the rare one, the one that comes every few levels.
From the other races,
you get one
you
magic
start
kind of
going
thing.
down that road, then you can start thinking about how your particular race that you're looking at like progressed, and maybe it's the orc subtype group, whatever, that predominantly dealt with crafting like two-handed weapons or grand large-scale weapons. So in the human make, the iron and steel weapons, you get a bunch of one-handed swords, and maybe at the high end you get what fantasy is called the bastard sword or the hand-and-a-half sword, where you can use it one-handed or two-handed. And that's about the best that you'll get out of the iron weapons. So if you wanted to have the great sword, the great club, the great axe, The Great Club, I think anyone would be able to craft.
I got a big piece of lumber.
It's a pretty simple concept, but
How do you make a great club? You find a bigger club.
you find a bigger piece of wood. But in that regard, then you could make certain weapons predominantly in the purview of those races. So the only way you get the two-handed great axe,
and you can throw it through role playing. Like now they have to do these things in order to achieve. And you can do the same thing. Like if you were to incorporate stuff like that, you can scale it the same way it scales normally. Sans the magic. Like you can scale the numbers.
The beauty of it
can go up without magic
the
being
D&D
involved.
system that we're using most predominantly at the moment, which is 5th edition.
It doesn't go very high.
Which
like,
is 5th edition. You don't have a standing necessity for a magic weapon.
You don't vampires and all that don't need stuff.
There
anymore?
are things that have resistance if you don't have magic, but
there's nothing that you can't damage if you don't have magic.
In theory, you could play the entire game without ever having a magical weapon, because there's a lot of classes that one way or another gain the ability to add magical damage.
Oh, okay. So there's still the requirement that magical damage has to be done to the specific creature. It's just everybody's given the magic that they need.
Not everyone, and either through someone else in your party or you yourself will be able to essentially add magic to your attack one way or another.
So that you can be like a level 10 and never have incorporated magic into your character and not have a magic weapon and still be able to do magical damage before the day is done.
Essentially. I mean, again, depends on the players you have around you and, you know. But the thing is, with the system they set up, 5th edition is still high fantasy, but it's set up to run in a little more magic item light run. So, I mean, given that you can only attune to 3 items, and I know
unless you're
the Artificer
6,
recently.
Right? That's what I was told yesterday, I believe. 6.
Sure, I read it vaguely, so I can't even speak to it.
I did not read it, but I found some things I did. I found How to Make Your Adventure Not Suck book. It's on adventure creation and module building. It's
really
looks interesting. I'm thinking about buying it on Amazon.
Cool.
Good reviews. It looked to me like, how do you take the hero's journey and transfer it to an adventure module, which is like pretty much what we were talking about from the beginning of this, is like taking the rules that you need in storytelling and finding which ones are applicable to a role-playing game.
Fair enough.
But outside kind of media, what about pulling out actual? Because this is the thing, if you're playing in front of your group of friends, there is no copyright worries unless you're broadcasting it or something like that. So if you find the perfect piece of music in Dead Space, incorporating it into your game can add an insane amount of atmosphere. Now, the beautiful thing about a lot of that soundtrack stuff too is, unless it's certain things, like, look, everybody's gonna know, you know, like, so if you play Victory Final Fantasy battle music at the end, that can cause a bit of separation from
it could. Some people like it though.
Some people like it. It's good. It can boost morale. Woohoo! But it does make people realize I am playing a game.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of this music that, unless people are very, very into a certain thing, that it's gonna fade into the background. It's gonna add that same tension. You know what tension you're trying to get because you see the game you're pulling it from.
Yeah. A couple of months ago, I had a moment for the game I run online, where I was trying to build a somber moment. I was giving the players information about what transpired while they were off the plane. And we'd gone fishing through a bunch of the old war movies. And I believe we ended up landing on a track from Thin Red Line.
Oh, Thin Red Line? Is that? Yeah. I remember we were going through music trying to find your thing. Yeah.
And that really
really sold Thin Red Line.
It sold the moment entirely, in my opinion, and it just made me realize how effective music can be because it wasn't very loud. It wasn't like I was trying to overpower the people's speakers with it.
Well, that's they say about a soundtrack in film, right? You know when the soundtrack's good? When you didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it played into whatever emotion you were in at that exact moment. Like it
I
faded
wish
into
that
a
I was
piece
a
of the
little
thing.
better at gauging how to do that.
Oh, I'm worried
It's
that I'm going to
something that
overdo
I
it.
want to play with more, but as with all things that I keep telling you when you throw your ideas out there, it's a great idea. You just need to pull it back. It's a seasoning, not the main course.
Yeah. My problem is I'm worried about overdoing it because my next thought immediately jumped to, oh, I can do this for different sounds. Like if there's a trap that's just gotten triggered, I can actually have a queued up trigger trap sound that I play and then go roll, deck save, things like that. And I'm like, yeah, that can be cool. And it could be overdone. I already know. In my head, I'm like, you're going to overdo this. This is something you're going to pull out like 30 of these things for. Build it. Never use half of them. And then it's just going to be a cluster of you trying to get through it and it all discombobulated.
On the other hand, since we're on the topic, you're absolutely right. You would probably end up having like this massive switchboard.
Here's my library. And I bought this board, guys. It's got 8 buttons and I can pre-program them. Yeah, and then never fucking, never use it,
The other side of that, though, is if you had a trap sound or a trap cue like that, the moment that you played it, your players already know we're about to have to make some sort of a save or we're about to get it. So it kind of is like this... it does pull you back to the concept that you're playing a game versus trying to fully immerse yourself, but it could give you that shift where people are ready to respond to the thing that they know you're about to ask. Oh shit, we set off a trap. Okay, which save am I about to... I got the dice in my hand. I just need to know which number am I looking at and throwing dice.
What about like imagine going up to a large dungeon with huge stone doors, and when I'm describing it, I hit a play button, and then the door, you can hear the chunk 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 of the chain, and then you hear rumbling stone move, and it's like in the door open before you. I think stuff like that could, but again, like I said, I'm gonna be using it every 5 minutes, and my players are gonna be like, "Look, bro, are we playing a video game, or you want to fucking DM?"
I think the best way to achieve something like that is if you had like a co-GM or a person who's just involved enough with the game that he can listen to the cues and he or she knows, okay, the DM just gave the description about the door and he's about to go to the door opening, the gates opening sound. Oh, we're about to cross the rickety bridge. All right, that groaning, creaking wood sound. This is a great place to play. There are elements that definitely could help, but there are also elements that
can distract, can pull you.
distract.
Suspension of disbelief. I mean, it can be helpful, but if it's especially if it becomes that's one thing I've seen on Roll20 happen more than once is people who have added these things haven't done a dry run, like a tech rehearsal, and then they'll be in it and they'll be like, "Fuck, where's this thing at?" Or how did this thing isn't doing the thing I needed it to, or I thought I had the queue system work, but I don't, and it's like,
yeah,
it happens. That's what production and performance is.
Yeah. So that is it's an interesting idea. I think to set it up, you need an extra hand.
Do you think co-DMs is something we're going to see more of in the future? Now that DMing has become more of a service industry, and there are more people trying to use media to do it. There are more people, literally getting hired out as contractors to do it.
I know that back in the age of 2nd edition, co-GMs were used a lot more because encounters sometimes could include 20 or more creatures, and the players having control of 2-3 characters at a time in given moments. Yeah, that when you hear some of those stories, the reaction
Warhammer.
you had kind of is where my brain goes to. But
I was playing a tactical war game.
I'd almost say that what you're talking about is less of a co-GM and more like
A stage
production manager, production assistant. That's...
Well, I was thinking like because of the fact that it's being commercialized, can you imagine somebody with a van that's the D&D bros, and they do house parties like a clown or musicians do or things like that. They sell their services out to people who want to pay, and they come in with a whole setup of tech and They got the music and then the sound and the interactable everything.
I think they have that.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that. Well, yeah. I'm pretty sure they have that.
If they don't, they will be in a short while. Because with the amount of money I've seen that people are making on DMing online, it's a real thing. Also, did you know you can go to Cameo and get celebrities to cut cameo appearances for things by paying them small amounts of money? Now then combine that idea with the use of media and role-playing, and you just paid like... So you built a D&D story, and you have an NPC who's played by Leonard Nimoy that you can incorporate into the game.
I've got nothing on that one.
Yeah, it's a new thing they have. It's actually multiple sites that are doing it, but one of them is called Cameo. And you pay somebody to do, like, to read a small snippet of something. And it's different types of celebrities. I don't think Leonard Nimoy's he's probably not on there, but catch the drift.
I think we're just kind of drifting here in this conversation. And I think this is going to be a good place for us to cut for the night.
Okay.
So, I've been Steve.
And I'm John.
This is the Bull Critters Corner.
You guys
We'll
have a
see you
lovely
next
night.
time.
Yep.